I do want to thank, I know there's a lot going on today, so I want to thank members of the media who are here. I know we have budget hearings. I know there's other press events going on. But I want to welcome everyone here to the Senate Republican Conference Room for a press conference. A couple weeks ago, our conference rolled out its legislative agenda. And I don't think it would have been a surprise for anyone that one of the main topics, if not the primary or lead-off topic in that agenda, centered around affordability and the cost of living here in New York. Now, it's an election year. My colleagues across the aisle, both the governor and Senate and Assembly Democrats, they're also talking about affordability. There's a couple of differences. This conference has been talking about the cost of living in New York for several years, long before they picked up on sort of that buzzword and made it a centerpiece of their efforts. The other difference is they are part of the reason laws that they have championed, bills that have been signed into law by this governor, passed by both majorities, are a big reason why this state is unaffordable. They have been in charge, one party, for 7 years. They like to tell us about that. Well, the downside of that is they own the problems. So when they acknowledge that the state is unaffordable, they are at the same time telling you they are responsible for it. Now, that doesn't mean they want to take accountability, but they are admitting responsibility, which are obviously different things. We conducted several roundtables across the state this past fall and winter. I want to thank my members of my conference who participated in those. Every corner of this state, Western New York, Central New York, Finger Lakes, actually Central New York I know was canceled, I think, due to weather. That's the last one that's coming up. Senator Walczyk is going to be hosting that. But the Finger Lakes, I was at one with Senator Helming. I was at one on Long Island. I know there was one Senator Chan had in New York City. But at these roundtables, the point was to engage with conversations with real New Yorkers about why they thought, what were the real issues from their perspective. And these people included business owners, they included school officials, they included not-for-profit executives, they included healthcare officials, farmers, home builders, child care providers, anyone that in that region, obviously different regions produced a little bit of a different variation on stakeholders, but the point was to hear from them about what they thought was driving up costs and what we as elected leaders could do to address that. Not surprisingly, we heard high taxes. That's, I think, probably an obvious one to almost anyone paying attention. That New York has some of the highest taxes, whether they be property taxes, whether they be income taxes, whether they be business taxes, whatever it might be. Excessive regulations. Like 1A was excessive regulations. And even when we talk about things like child care, if you talk to any child care provider, someone who's in the space today, they will tell you, maybe in a hushed tone as to not offend somebody, but they will tell you that regulations are a huge driver of their costs, and as a result, a huge driver of the cost people pay for childcare. And that's true across so many industries and spaces. Skyrocketing energy costs. If there was one specific thing within the affordability world that people were concerned about, it's this. People are used to paying high taxes, sadly, in New York State. They paid them, I think they just we all figure they're going to go up over the years. But the energy, the rapid increase in the energy rates and people's utility bills in this state is alarming. It's alarming to business owners. It's alarming to homeowners. And no one is shielded from it. And we heard that a lot. And we're going to have a separate press conference in the future on energy specific and on this conference's legislative proposals around making energy more affordable and reliable here in New York. We heard about housing costs. the cost of constructing homes, why housing is so much more expensive in New York than other states. We even obviously heard about, certainly the cost of groceries and the cost of putting food on your kitchen table. All of these things by themselves would be a huge burden. But most New Yorkers, they're not dealing with these things by themselves. They're dealing with all of these things at the same time. And it is causing a real affordability crisis, and it is why people are leaving this state. And it is why this state will lose more congressional representation in Washington, D.C. Today, we're releasing the report, the culmination of all of these roundtables. It's entitled A More Affordable New York, and it lays out the blueprint. This report will be the seed, if you would, the foundation, the framework of our legislative ideas and our legislative agenda to try to make this state more affordable, borne out by those conversations with real New Yorkers expressing very real concerns. They took time. These folks took time out of their day. Some of them that were there for hours. And I want to make sure that they know that they had a huge impact on actual bills and hopefully laws that are passed in this body and in this Capitol. Some of these proposals you're going to hear today about lowering property taxes. We have a very bold tax initiative that is going to be championed by this conference. You're going to hear from Senator Rhodes on that. Relief from high energy bills, and obviously efforts to cut through layers of red tape that drive up costs. So while the Democrats in New York and the Senate Democrats, Assembly Democrats, and the governor, they're going to keep talking about affordability. But I'm going to tell you right now, at the exact same time they're talking about it and saying the word as many times as they can fit it into a sentence, they are continuing to push things that are either not changing that dynamic or that are actually undermining and driving up the very costs and making life less affordable. I want to turn it over to somebody now who is on our housing committee. She has been a champion of trying to make housing more affordable in this state. She certainly knows. She's going to touch on the energy piece a little bit as well, but she has certainly been a champion for making New York more affordable. There's probably no more articulate advocate we have in our conference on some of these topics, and that is my good friend, our conference chair, Senator Pam Hellman.
Thank you, Leader. The Leader mentioned the affordability roundtables that we held across the state, but I wanted to share something a little more personal. It was a conversation I had with a lifelong resident from my district. He's someone who, with his wife, they raised their 3 kids here. They built a very successful small business, and they were really looking forward to retiring in New York State. But what he said to me, it's resonated with me. He said, "Pam, we love New York, but I'm not so sure that New York loves us anymore." It stuck with me because I hear versions of that same story every single day from people who've worked so hard, they've played by the rules, and they've invested in our communities. They've really strengthened our communities. And now those are the very same people who are feeling squeezed out. These are people who want to stay in New York, and they should be able to stay. We should be helping them be able to stay here. But every single year, the cost of living pushes them closer to the edge. I heard on the late news last night, ABC affiliate was reporting that last year alone, New York State lost over 400,000 residents. People aren't leaving because they want to. They're leaving because they can't afford to stay here. And instead of relief, what we hear from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle is that they continue to push more spending, more bureaucracy, and more costly mandates. The proposed budget uses higher revenues and Wall Street bonuses as an excuse to spend billions more than last year. It's driving our state spending to an unprecedented $260 billion. But I have to tell you something. Affordability in my district, and I'm sure affordability in the districts of everyone who's behind me, it's not measured by budgets. It's measured by whether people can cover their housing costs, whether they can pay their utility bills, and whether they can stay in the communities that they love. It's what people feel every single month when they sit down at the table and they try to figure out, how do I pay all these bills? How do I pay those utility bills that are increasing, in some instances, by 50%? But that's what our focus is on. It's on providing real relief. When it comes to housing, we support a targeted property tax credit for first-time homebuyers that will help families put down roots and build long-term security. For current homeowners, we've introduced legislation to allow needed repairs and renovations to be done without triggering drastic property tax increases, a concern I hear from seniors all the time. We're also cutting red tape that slows down construction and drives up costs, streamlining permitting, easing burdensome rules, and allowing compliance with the less costly 2020 Energy Code. Now, we all know that housing affordability is dramatically impacted by energy affordability. Because of the energy mandates in the CLCPA, known as the Democrats' Green Energy Plan, New York's residential electricity rates, as I said, are about 50% higher than the national average. These rigid mandates have stalled construction, hurt businesses, and left schools struggling to pay soaring utility bills. But the good news here is, this conference, we have a solid plan, a better plan. Our conference supports an all-of-the-above energy strategy that protects public safety, grid reliability, and affordability while still pursuing common-sense environmental goals. That's something that is, to me personally, very troubling, how the Democrats try to push this narrative that you're either for all electric energy mandates, all green energy mandates, or you're against the environment. That's not the truth at all. You can have both, and that's what we've proposed. To us, this means restoring local decision-making and giving municipalities the flexibility to opt out of energy mandates. There have been so many housing projects in my district alone that have come to a grinding halt. One of them would have built 650 new homes for people, but because of the all-electric mandates have come to a stop. Our plan includes working with firefighters and industry experts to develop standards to protect our neighborhoods from dangerous battery storage facilities. Our plan includes, and you all know this, you've heard us say it loud and clear time and time again, repealing the all-electric building and school bus mandates, and allowing for adjustments when energy mandates threaten reliability or spike utility bills. And finally, we have what I think is a great piece of legislation that would return, you ready for this? Nearly $1 billion in unused funds from the Climate Investment Account back to the ratepayers. This bill and others will put real money back into the pockets of people, our seniors and businesses, who have paid into the system. I could go on about our package of bills. It is very exhaustive. I hope you'll take a look at it. But the bottom line for this conference is, affordability is the expectation in New York State. It's not the exception. That's what drives all of us, because we know that when New Yorkers can't afford to live here, we just don't lose people. We're losing the very foundation of our state. I thank you all for your time today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Senator Steve Rhodes. Senator Rhodes is the ranking member on Ethics and Internal Governments and Labor Committees. Senator.
Thank you, Senator Helming, for your presentation and for your leadership. And to my colleagues in the Republican Conference, it's an honor to stand here before you today and stand here before all of you out here in the media today and talk about real solutions to the affordability crisis that we face. And leaders set it up so well, underscoring the challenges that we have. You know, at the Affordability Roundtable on Long Island, we had business leaders, we had a variety of interests come in and talk to us about the problems that they are having making ends meet on Long Island. And the issues that they raised were the same issues that are being raised across the state. But the common theme is that while our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are talking about affordability, the colleagues that are standing behind me and those that are in budget hearings right now are the ones that are offering actual solutions to tackle the challenges of affordability. Ronald Reagan once said, you can't be for big government, big taxes, and big bureaucracy and somehow still be for the little guy. And that's exactly, I would have thought he was actually talking about what's happening in New York State. With the budget that was just introduced by the governor, we have now, under one-party Democratic rule, had an $89 billion increase in spending, almost 60% increase in how much New York State is going to spend just over the course of the last 7 years. The Democrats have been in control of the governor and both houses of the state legislature. High taxes, overregulation, runaway spending, those are the things that are making New York less affordable. And we see it reflected. As much as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle love to complain about what's happening down in Washington, but take a look at what's happening right here in New York. We are number one in personal income taxes. We are number two in the entire country in total tax burden when you factor in property and income taxes as well. Property tax burden is the fourth highest in the nation, second highest in the number of state regulations. You look at costs. Median home price is almost 28% higher than the national average. Healthcare and health insurance premiums, almost 60% higher than the national average. Auto insurance premiums, 41% higher than the national average. Child care, 18% higher than the national average. This is where New York ranks in comparison to every other state that operates under the same policies that are coming from Washington. Why is New York lagging behind in every category? That's because of lack of leadership. The lack of leadership that's been shown by our governor, the lack of leadership that's been shown by the majorities in the Senate and the Assembly in creating the very policies that are driving up costs for the average family on Long Island and all across the state. And that's why I'm so proud to stand with our conference that is offering real solutions to that crisis. And there is no crisis, I guess, more pronounced than the amount of taxes that we pay. Every dollar that New York State spends is a dollar that comes out of the pocket of some taxpayer, of a resident, of a business, someone who's trying to make a living here in our state. And that's what's making it more challenging. And so when we're talking about a solution to affordability, affordability isn't handing out after we take 20s out of your pocket and handing you back a few cents in the form of a $200, $300, $400 inflation reduction rebate check, which was the governor's huge idea from last year. It's about not taking that money out of your pocket in the first place. And so our conference is offering numerous legislative initiatives. And I want to, first off, credit my colleague, Senator Jack Martins, for championing for years now the no tax on tips, no tax for overtime, which was his legislation, which now the governor has signed on to. Senator Weber, Bill S. 8489, offering a 3-year freeze on property taxes. The property tax burden, particularly on Long Island, where the average homeowner is paying $15,000 a year in property tax, that is going to make a tremendous difference. Senator Gallivan, Bill S. 219, is repealing the Health Care Reform Act, the HCRA taxes. Those HCRA taxes account for between $5 and $6 billion annually and are a huge driver to the incredibly escalating health care costs that we see throughout the state. And on the topic of personal income tax, and I noted that New York State has the highest personal income taxes in the entire country, next week we will be rolling out a plan for the single largest cut in personal income taxes, a $30 billion cut in the history of New York State that will actually, for every resident, for a family making $100,000 to a single taxpayer making $50,000, the first 50 for a single taxpayer, the first $100,000 for a family will be exempt from state income taxes. That's a 10-year phase-in plan. The median household income in New York State is about $89,000. That means, when fully phased in, the average taxpayer in the state of New York will pay no state income taxes. That underscores the dramatic increase that we have seen in spending. I mentioned at the start of this, $89 billion increase in state spending over the course of the last 7 years that Democrats have been in charge. New York State collects only $75 billion in personal income taxes. Think about that. We're going to start returning that money back to the pockets of taxpayers. For the average family, that is a $6,000 reduction in the amount that they will pay in personal income taxes. And so when we talk about tackling affordability, we're not offering pocket change. We're offering real, sustainable relief to New York taxpayers that will stop the outward migration that we are seeing so dramatically. Over 1.5 million people have left the state of New York in the last 10 years. There was an article that came out last night. New York expects to lose, New York and California will lose 6 congressional seats if the 2030 census were taken today. New York is losing talent, New York is losing people, New York is losing influence, not only here in Albany, but down in Washington, and we aim to do something about it. And it's my honor now to turn the program over to one of my great colleagues who is a fighter for New York State residents and taxpayers, and that is Senator Rob Rolison. Senator?
I just want to say that when we're talking about the affordability roundtables, the first one was in the Hudson Valley, and that was myself.
Don't gloat.
Okay, I'm not gloating, but the point that I'm going to make is I was there, of course, with my colleague and friend Senator Bill Weber. Also, Assemblyman Brian Maher was there as well, and I was really very thankful to see that this conference wanted to do this, because if you don't measure, you can't actually address the challenges that you have. And this conference measured it statewide. And I know that we heard essentially the same thing throughout the state. The leader alluded to it in the beginning of this press conference. And as a ranking member on Children and Families, a committee assignment that I asked for and was so blessed and fortunate to get when I came here in 2023, childcare has been that topic that was spoken about statewide, and we measured it, and now we're going to address it through a bill that I introduced yesterday, which is Senate 9049. I'll get to that in a second. But coming here in 2023, the very first public hearing that I attended was on childcare. And I will tell you, I did not know that public hearings went around 8, 9, 10 hours. And I was in the hearing room listening to child care providers from throughout the state in 2023. And a lot had to do with burdensome regulations brought down from the state, specifically from OCFS, on how they could conduct and make their child care education, really it's what it is, a child care education, work, especially through COVID. And one of the things that was consistent from the North Country to Long Island to the Hudson Valley to New York City to Western New York was that the state actually, and did a good thing, really relaxed a lot of the regulations so we could get children in seats in these child care centers. So their parents, many of which at that time were prioritizing first responders, could go to work because their children were in child care. And that really said a lot to me because, again, knowing a little bit about it, because as Mayor of Poughkeepsie, we worked very closely with our child care providers in my time there on some of those similar types of issues, and really it had to do with struggling to stay open, that you had to find ways to do that, and they did that during COVID. They made it happen so they could get our children in these child care centers so their parents could go to work. And when you think about the cost of child care, anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 plus a year, it is very expensive, and it is all, of course, related to affordability and what our agenda is going to do, because everything is related to that. And if you can have more money available, you can go and seek child care. For some people who can't, they can't go to work, and they can't do other things that help them in their daily lives. And so what this bill does is this says to OCFS, you've got to have flexibility, OCFS, when you're working with child care providers, especially as it relates to the directors. And these are directors who are qualified child care educators, but there's an issue with them actually going into the classroom. And we know that, we've heard this time and time again, that staffing at child care centers, child education centers, can be very, very difficult at some times. When an educator does not come in, sometimes children can't go there. The parents, caregivers get a phone call because someone is out. We want the director to be able to go there and go into that classroom. She or he is there. That's the flexibility that we need OCFS to allow, because there are a lot of proposals, and these are proposals that are going to help the child care system, but it's not going to be next week or even say next year. We need to do things right now, again, and we talked about measuring. This was brought up in the Hudson Valley Roundtable from our Dutchess County Child Care Coalition. So, we heard, we listened, and now we're taking action. And I would say respectfully to everyone, especially OCFS, which I think is doing a tremendous job with the resources that they have. This is something that you can fix, because we're talking about qualified people. You're just letting them go into the classroom. It's not permanent, but it is when you have a staffing issue. That way, children can get there. Parents and caregivers can go to work, can go to school, can go to the doctor, and their children are, of course, in a safe space. And also, the ratios of how many child care providers have to be in the classroom based on the age of the child. That is also something we're asking OCFS to look at and maybe also adjust, so we're able to do something now. And again, listen, you know this, I say this a lot, I'm very proud to be part of this conference, and we measured throughout this state, and now this conference is reacting to what people from all over the state of New York, and when we had these 2 or 3 hour meetings, we didn't have to check the box whether you're a Democrat or Republican. We asked people to come there and tell us what their concerns were. We heard it, and now we as a conference are putting forth common sense solutions to these challenges. Because again, you can't fix, you can't address what you don't measure. And this conference has measured it. And I'll turn it back over to my colleague and my friend, our leader, Senator Rob Ortt. Thank you.